She sat by the window every morning. Even though she couldn't see the sun, her fingers would trace the worn wooden frame, and her face tilted gently upward, feeling the warmth of morning light that slipped through the dusty curtains. Her name was Eleanor, and for the last 12 years the world had been dark for her blindness, taking away the colors of her life, but not the memory of them. Eleanor lived alone in a small brick cottage at the edge of town. The neighbors knew little about her. Some said she had once been a school teacher, others believed she had worked at the library, but no one knew her anymore. Time had pulled everyone away, friends had moved, others passed, and her only sister hadn't written in years. Yet Eleanor stayed in the same little house, as if waiting for something or someone. Her days were quiet, too quiet. The wind would whistle through the trees, and Eleanor would listen to the rustle of leaves like a song only she could understand. Her hands, though aged, were strong. She would make tea every morning, knit in the afternoons, and sit by the fireplace in the evenings, with only the clock ticking beside her. And then, one cold autumn afternoon, something changed. It started. With a soft sound, almost like a whisper, faint meow. Eleanor paused. She turned her head slightly, her ears picking up the fragile cry again. There it was, near the doorstep. With a trembling hand, she reached for her cane and slowly made her way to the door. Her fingers found the doorknob. She opened it gently. Silence. For a moment, it was nothing but the cool wind brushing her cheeks. Then she felt a delicate rub against her leg. She gasped softly. "Hello?" She whispered, unsure if she was speaking to a stray breeze or something real. The response came in the form of a soft purr, and in that moment, Alana smiled. The little cat didn't rush in. She just sat there, watching with curious golden eyes. A small, striped creature, thin, perhaps a bit hungry, but her gaze held warmth. She didn't need to speak. Eleanor felt her presence. "I don't know your name," Eleanor said softly, kneeling slowly, "but I suppose you don't need one." The cat blinked slowly, then rubbed her head against Eleanor's trembling hand. From that day on, the cat returned. Every morning, just as Eleanor sat by the window, she would hear the soft patter of paws, the delicate cry of a meow. And without fail, the little feline would find her way beside Eleanor's feet. Curling up as if she had always belonged, Eleanor began to talk more, not to people, but to the cat. "Do you know what colors look like?" Small laugh. "I remember blue. The sky was my favorite. I wonder if your eyes are blue." The cat meowed in response, almost as if she understood. Eleanor named her Whisper, not because the cat made little noise, but because she arrived like a gentle, comforting whisper into a life that had been far too silent. Whisper never demanded anything. She didn't ask for food or a lap. She simply existed beside Eleanor, and in doing so, she gave the elderly woman something she hadn't felt in years. Companionship. Eleanor began to laugh against soft giggles when Whisper chased shadows, quiet chuckles when the cat would nudge her arm mid-knitting, begging for attention. Neighbors noticed the change. The house that once seemed lifeless now had a spark. Sometimes a young boy delivering groceries would find the cat sitting proudly on the windowsill, as if guarding her queen. He told his mother that the old lady didn't seem so lonely anymore. Winter came. Harsh and unforgiving, Eleanor's health began to weaken. She coughed more. Her steps grew slower. But every morning, she still sat by the window. And every morning, Whisper came. On particularly cold days, the cat would jump onto the old armchair beside Eleanor and nestle close, as if to share her warmth. And Eleanor, with frail hands, would stroke her gently, whispering stories from a lifelong past. "I once danced," she said one night, "in a ballroom. I remember the music. It made my heart sing. I wonder, would you have danced with me?" "Too, little one," Whisper purred softly. They didn't need words. As the days passed, their bond deepened. Whisper once, just a stray, now moved with Eleanor's rhythm. When Eleanor cried silently in the night, Whisper would find her way to her bed, curling at her feet. When Eleanor chuckled, the cat would meow in tune, but there was something more, something unspoken, something Eleanor couldn't explain. Sometimes she felt as if the cat knew things, knew when she was sad before she even said a word, knew when she was cold before she reached for the blanket, knew when the silence was too heavy, filled. It, with her presence, Whisper had become her eyes, her listener, her soul's mirror, yet no one else ever seemed to see the cat. One day, a neighbor dropped by with soup and asked, "You have a cat now?" Eleanor smiled. "Yes, she's my friend." The neighbor looked around. "I don't see any cat." Eleanor tilted her head, confused. "She's right here. She was just sitting by the window." The neighbor looked again, puzzled. Maybe she slipped out. But Eleanor wasn't so sure, because Whisper was always there, always silent, always watching, but never seen by anyone else. Still, Eleanor didn't worry. In her heart, she knew the cat was real. Realer than most people she had known. Whisper's warmth was real, her touch gentle, her presence healing. And perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't an ordinary cat. The days were growing colder, snow-blanketed rooftops like quiet memories, and bare trees stood like shadows of forgotten seasons. But within that silence, Eleanor waited not for spring, but for the one small creature that brought warmth even. In the dead of winter, every morning she sat in her chair near the window, the same window she could no longer see, but could feel where the sunlight once kissed her cheek, where the softest paw had touched her foot. She waited for that sound, that familiar, delicate meow. The gentle rustle of paws on the doorstep, Whisper's arrival, but that morning, something was different. The house remained still. The wind moaned outside, whirling past the glass, but no meow came. No soft paws, no brush against her legs. Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as they gripped the arms of her chair. "Whisper," she called softly. Silence. She waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. By noon, her heart felt heavier than it had in months. Whisper had never missed a morning. She stood slowly, her joints stiff and aching, and made her way to the door. She opened it and let the cold air wash over her. It was biting and cruel. She didn't mind. She listened, straining to hear even a faint cry. But there was nothing. She stepped out onto the porch, careful and slow. The snow crunched beneath her slippers. Still nothing. With a heavy heart, she whispered into the wind, "Come back, little one, please." She stayed there for a few moments longer, then returned inside, the cold clinging to her bones. That night, she could not sleep. She lay in bed with her hand outstretched, reaching for the weight she had grown used to feeling. Near her feet, but the space remained empty. She cried, not loud, not desperate. Just soft tears, the kind that fall when a heart cracks quietly. The next morning was the same. No Whisper, and the next days turned to a weak Eleanor's world, which had been so recently colored with silent joy, returned to gray stillness. She tried to tell herself it was just a stray. Maybe Whisper had found a new home. Maybe she had moved on. Maybe she had never really been hers at all, but her heart wouldn't accept that, because Whisper wasn't just a cat. She had been something more, something almost spiritual. The house felt colder now, emptier. Eleanor spoke less. She sat quietly, knitting half-finished scarves that no one would wear. She listened to the wind again, but it no longer sang, just blew dot. Then one night it happened. She heard it not outside, but inside. A meow, soft, familiar. Eleanor froze. Her ears perked. Her heart raced. Whisper. She sat up in bed. She reached out into the darkness, and there it was. The gentle brush of fur against her hand, a soft purr. Tears welled in her eyes as she smiled in the darkness. "You're here?" She didn't question how. She didn't ask why Whisper had disappeared. She just accepted that she was back. But something had changed. Whisper was even quieter now. She moved more like a shadow than before. She didn't eat from the dish, Eleanor set out. She didn't leave paw prints in the snow by the door. But she was there. Eleanor could feel her presence, warm and real, nestled beside her. No one else could hear her, and no one else ever saw her. One afternoon, the grocery boy came by. Eleanor asked him to look near the window to tell her what Whisper was doing. He looked confused. "There's no cat, Miss Eleanor," he said gently. "She's right there," Eleanor replied, with a soft certainty in her voice. The boy smiled. Awkwardly, said nothing more, then left. But Eleanor didn't doubt herself. She could feel a whisper beside her, as present as the wind, as real as her own breath. Sometimes she would hear soft footsteps in the hallway, even when she hadn't moved. Other times she'd wake in the middle of the night to a soft purring at her side. Whisper had returned, but not in the way the world understood. She had become something else, a spirit. Weaker, her legs could no longer carry her far, her arms tired easily, her coughs became deeper. The doctor came once, said she needed more care, perhaps a nurse, but Eleanor refused. "I have someone looking after me," she said. The doctor looked around the empty house. Who? Eleanor just smiled. Someone quiet. And indeed, Whisper never left her side. On days when Eleanor could no longer rise from bed, Whisper would curl on her chest. Her soft weight, a comfort like no medicine could offer. Eleanor began to speak aloud again. As if to fill the room with warmth, she told Whisper stories of her youth, of the garden she once grew, of the time she first fell in love, of the baby she had lost long ago. Whisper listened. Always. Her purring the only sound in the house. And then, one night, as the snow fell silently outside, Eleanor lay in bed, her breathing shallow, her hand resting gently on a patch of fur that no one else could see. "I think," she whispered. Whisper purred softly, curling closer. "You've stayed with me, even when no one else did." A pause. "You're not just a cat, are you?" No answer, only warmth. Eleanor smiled through her tears. "Will you come with me?" And in that moment, she felt it. Not just a purr, not just the brush of fur, but a light, a glow inside her heart, and then peace. When the neighbors came the next morning, the house was quiet. Eleanor lay still, a faint smile on her face. Beside her, nothing. No cat, no trace of paw prints. Just a feeling in the room, something soft, something sacred. They said she passed peacefully in her sleep, but the boy who delivered her groceries swore. He heard a meow when he stepped onto the porch. Soft, fading sound like a goodbye, and for days after, a small cat, striped, with golden eyes, was seen near the cemetery gate. Sitting quietly at the edge of the frost-covered grass, she didn't meow. She didn't move. She just waited, as if watching over someone, as if waiting for a friend. And some say she still visits, only on quiet winter mornings, only when the world is still, only when someone lonely needs to remember that love, even in its quietest form, never truly. The cottage had been quiet for weeks. After Eleanor's passing, the neighbors noticed a strange stillness around the house, as if even the wind was hesitant to pass too loudly or the snow to fall too harshly. Something lingered there, something tender yet unexplainable. No one dared remove her things. The mail piled up. The plants by the window wilted, but the rocking chair near the window, where she once sat every morning, remained untouched, and some swore it still creaked gently at dusk, though the house was locked tight. But there was one thing: no one could ignore the cat. Not everyone saw her, only a few, and always at strange times, just before dawn, just after a snowfall, or in the fading glow of twilight. Some said she sat by the gate. Others claimed she walked the path to the cemetery. One boy swore he saw her sitting atop Eleanor's grave, completely still, her tail curled neatly around her paws, staring into nothing. The strange thing was, no one could follow her. The moment anyone tried to get close, she would vanish. Not run, not hide, vanish. As if she were made of mist. The locals began to whisper stories. They said the cat had been Eleanor's guardian. Some believed she had come for Eleanor's soul, not out of darkness, but out of love to guide her gently into the next world. Others, said Eleanor, had never been alone in her final years because that cat had been sent by someone. Something, but no one knew for sure. Until one day, a young woman arrived at the edge of town. She was quiet, soft-spoken. Her eyes were pale like Eleanor's, not blind, but cloudy, as if always looking beyond what others could see. She carried a leather satchel, worn and faded, and she asked for the old cottage by name. Eleanor's place, she said. The shopkeeper who gave her directions asked, "Were you family?" She simply replied, "Something like that." She arrived at the cottage just before sunset. The snow had melted slightly that week, revealing patches of dead grass and cold earth. The house looked almost asleep, draped in shadows, with no signs of life, but she knocked anyway, then smiled. "I know you're still listening." She whispered to the door. She unlocked it. No one asked how she had the key inside. Nothing had changed. Everything was as Eleanor had left it. The teacup beside her chair, the half-finished scarf draped on the armrest. Even the old gramophone that hadn't worked in years sat quietly, collecting dust. The young woman walked in slowly, her fingers brushing over the furniture with a kind of reverence. Then she called softly, whisper, "Silence," then. From the back room, a soft, familiar meow. She didn't flinch. She walked toward the sound, entered the room, and there on the windowsill, in a sliver of fading light, sat the striped cat, Golden Eyes. Still as a statue, the woman sat on the bed, sighing deeply. "So, you stayed with her until the end?" The cat blinked slowly, then leapt down and walked to her feet. The woman reached down and stroked the cat's head. "You always find the ones who need you the most." She sat in silence, staring into nothing, her fingers gently running through Whisper's fur, and then she began to speak. She was my mother. The words hung in the air like a secret too heavy to hold. She gave me up when I was just a baby, said she couldn't raise a child on her own. I spent years wondering why, years hating her, years thinking I was unwanted. Whisper looked up. But I never knew she went blind. I never knew she ended up alone. I never even knew where she lived, not until a letter came after she passed. The woman pulled out a folded paper from her bag, Eleanor's handwriting, fragile and shaking. "Never stop thinking about you," it read. "Not a day. I couldn't see the world anymore, but I still saw your face in my dreams. If a creature ever finds me, soft, quiet, kind, know that I sent her in the only way I could. I hope she finds you too someday." The woman wiped her eyes, her voice trembling. "She loved me all along," Whisper purred. The woman stayed there that night. She slept in Eleanor's bed, curled with Whisper beside her, and for the first time in years she felt something she had long forgotten. Home. In the following days, she decided not to sell the house. Instead, she opened it. She planted flowers in the yard, repaired the broken fence, cleaned the windows, and every morning she sat in the rocking chair with a warm blanket, a cup of tea, and Whisper on her lap. People began to notice. The cottage was no longer silent. Children would wave at the woman with the white eyes and the cat with golden ones. Neighbors stopped by to share stories of Eleanor. Some even claimed the cat had smiled at them. One old man said, "That cat, it's not just a cat, it's something else, something old, something kind." And he was right, because Whisper had been there before Eleanor and would be there long after. She wasn't bound by years, or places, or even death. She was drawn to souls, broken ones, lonely ones, the forgotten and the grieving. She came when silence grew too heavy and stayed until the heart found peace. The young woman, whose name was Clara, never questioned how Whisper had stayed so long, or how she understood so much. She simply knew, and in that knowing, she healed. Clara began to write again. She kept a journal, not for herself, but for others who felt alone, stories of a blind woman and her silent companion, stories of forgiveness, of returning, of finding something you thought you lost forever, and Whisper remained by her side, just as she had with Eleanor, quiet, steady, timeless. At night, Clara would speak aloud into the dim glow of the lamp. "I think I understand now," she would say softly. She wasn't saving the cat was saving her. A whisper would purr, and outside the wind would carry the sound of peace, not loud, not demanding, just years passed, seasons turned like pages of a forgotten book. The trees outside Eleanor's cottage grew taller, their branches dancing in the wind like they remembered the touch of old hands. Brushing against them, Clara remained. She never married, never left the small town. She didn't feel the need to chase anything anymore. She had once searched for answers, forgiveness, love. She had found all in the silence of that small brick house, and in the quiet presence of a cat, who still came to her bed every night. Whisper never aged. She never grew slower, never weaker. Her eyes remained golden, her body agile, her presence unchanged. Clara knew she was not an ordinary creature, but she never asked, because some things, when loved deeply enough, don't need explanations. They are simply felt. Whisper had now touched two lives completely.
Ow.
Maybe more before, maybe more still to come, but with Clara, it was different. They shared something even beyond time, a bond made not from ownership but recognition, as if they had known each other before this life, as if they were both waiting to come home. Sometimes Clara would sit with Whisper in the garden, watching the sky shift from soft pink to deep violet, and she would whisper, "Do you think she sees us now?" Cat would purr gently. Clara no. Longer grieved, she no longer held bitterness. What once was heavy now sat light inside her like a folded letter, carried but no longer read, and Whisper had made it so. Word of Clara's quiet. Kindness began to spread. Stray animals found their way to her home, some wounded, some frightened. She took them in. She gave them names, warmth, and a place where they could just exist without fear. It became known as the Quiet House. Among the townspeople, not a shelter, not an adoption center, just a place where the forgotten were remembered. Again, children came to listen to stories. The elderly came to sit in the garden. Even those who believed in nothing came and left with something they couldn't name. Peace and Whisper remained at the heart of it. All watching, listening, healing, but every light must one day soften into dusk. Clara grew older. Her hair turned silver, her steps slower, her voice softer. But her heart remained whole. One winter evening, snow began to fall, not harshly, but like a soft lullaby. Clara sat in her old chair by the window, Whisper on her lap. She stroked the cat's fur slowly, gently, as if memorizing it one last. "Time. I think it's almost time," she whispered. Whisper looked up, her golden eyes calm. "Thank you. For finding her, for finding me, for staying." The wind outside stilled, and in that moment, Clara closed her eyes, not in fear, not in sorrow, but in deep, complete contentment. She passed peacefully like Eleanor had years before, with the same small smile and Whisper. She stayed, not just that night, but beyond it. She walked the halls of the house once more, sat by the fireplace, touched the scarves that hung in the basket, and then quietly, as always, she slipped away. The neighbors found Clara the next morning. They buried her beside Eleanor, beneath the willow tree in the old cemetery. And though no one spoke much, there was an unspoken understanding in the silence. The same cat that no one could explain, yet all had seen at least once, was spotted sitting between their graves, eyes closed as if listening to a voice. The world couldn't hear, and then she was gone. The house still stands, even today. Many years later, it remains untouched by time in strange little ways. Flowers bloom early in the garden. Birds nest near the windows. And sometimes when the snow falls, people say they hear a soft meow echoing in the air. Children walking past whisper stories about the cat who never dies, about the blind woman who saw more than anyone, about the daughter who returned, and about a house where silence was never empty. It was full of love, waiting quietly to be heard. Some say Whisper appears to those who are grieving, to those who are lost, to those whose pain is quiet, the kind that no one sees. She arrives like a shadow, a flicker, a presence. And when she curls beside them, the world becomes softer, even if only for a moment. And perhaps that is all we ever need. A whisper in the dark, to remind us that even in our loneliest hour, we are never truly alone.